Hey guys, what's up? I am excited to start what might become a new series. Maybe not, maybe it'll be a one-off kind of thing. But the last couple of years I've been doing a ton of arranging. I feel like that has become the bread and butter of my work. And I love it. Arranging is such a fun puzzle a lot of times. And so I thought maybe once a month or whenever I have time to make these breakdown videos, I would take you through some of my favorite arranging projects I've done over the last few years. And today I want to start with one that is just about a year old from when we first started working on it. This is a big band track for an artist by the name of Wil Merrell. He is a great vocalist here in Nashville, and he approached me about a year, maybe even more than a year ago, about helping him put together this EP. It started with this song, Whatever Will I Do. It's kind of a classic big band vibe with a little twist in the middle. It has this kind of New Orleans vibe there in the middle. So let's just jump in. So this track, here's how it starts. So big band, typically you have 5 saxes, 2 alto, 2 tenor, 1 bari. You usually have 4 trombones, 4 trumpets, right? So that's a lot of instruments. The way we track this, you can kind of maybe even tell from how the session is set up based on how things are grouped, but I think we had 6 players, alto, tenor, 2 trombones, 2 trumpets. Yeah, so we had 6 players at a time for the horn players, basically stacked it twice. So we were maybe 1 player short from the typical, what was that, 13 horn players, but it worked. And so what we have here, this is the first stack. Really great group of players here. We tracked this at Gray Box Studios here in Nashville. And then here's the second stack, soloed. Right, and you put them together. And it sounds way more full. The beginning essentially is like an A7 sus vibe. Like if you were to like reduce harmonically what's going on, it's essentially right, that kind of feel, but that's kind of boring. So it's always like, well, what can you do to kind of help vary what's there, you know? Because when Wil approached me, it was really just like a real simple demo with like piano, MIDI piano, and his scratch vocal. And so from that, I wanted to kind of explode it, so to speak. So you kind of have these various overlapping lines, and the saxes, sax 1 and 2 are playing that. The trumpets are as well. Then you kind of have this call and response thing, which I love call and response, especially in big band music. The trombones respond, and then the trumpets come back with kind of a variation. You know, so much of arranging, especially in this jazz big band idiom, for me at least, I think about how much can I do with as little as possible. So if you have this ascending figure and you just move it down and then you vary it, and then there's like, so there's this again, and you're just kind of building variations. It's like 3 different variations, moving it around diatonically, right? It's still within, we're in D major here. We're moving it around the key of D major at a few little chromatic passing tones. And then to kind of create some harmonic interest, right? We're starting here for 2 bars, and I'll put the score up on the screen if you're curious. I knew I wanted to end with like the A13 flat 9 feel, you know. And but if you were there the whole time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Way less satisfying if you've been here for 3 bars and then you finish there. Right? There's really only a couple notes that are different. 2 notes actually. There's really only 2 notes that are different. The B moving to a B flat, and the D moving down to a C sharp. Right? So in the first measure, I'm thinking, right, we have some melodic interest, right? Call and response. We have variation. And then so here in the 3rd bar, I went to a 2, right? An E7 or an E9. And then this chord here, which might be kind of weird, like an F13 sharp 11. Right? We could have totally stayed on A7 the whole time. Right? But by changing it a little bit, create a little bit of movement there towards the end, and as a result, it's way more interesting. So here is that one more time. I remember watching this interview with Sting, and he said something like, if in the first 10 or 15 seconds I'm not surprised in some way, right, you've lost his attention. Not that I arranged this for Sting necessarily, but I did want to think about just creating interest, right? How much can you do, again, with as little as possible? So let's keep moving. This song pretty much is in, like, there's two sections before it goes to the New Orleans section. There's like an A section, right? You might call it a verse, and then you have the B section, right? And very typical of like an AABA form, Great American Songbook style. This is an original song that Wil wrote, but it still very much follows the DNA of a jazz standard. So here we go. So leaving space, call and response from the horns, piano. So that's an example of something that is very common in big band music, right? Horns, in this case, the trombones, kind of functioning as a unit. Real tight voicings, right? It's an A minor 9 going to a D7 or a D13. And they're just real close voicings. Something you might play, like if you're a piano player, something you might play in your left hand. And then again, on the theme of trying to do as much as you can with as little as possible, that rhythmic figure, 1 and 2 and, that we had from the beginning, right? 1 and 2 and, 1 and 2 and, right? You hear that immediately. It's displaced by 2 beats in the saxes. 1, 2, 3, and 4 and, right? 3-note figure with a syncopation going into either a big beat 1 or a big beat 3. Dynamically speaking, it's a big beginning, right? It's fortissimo, all guns blazing, that kind of thing. Verse starts, everybody's out, and then it's kind of a matter of, well, how do you orchestrate it in such a way where it doesn't feel like it's a letdown necessarily, but there's definitely an energy difference, right? So for me, I wanted to make sure that there was still some punchiness rhythmically, so that's where the trombones come in. And then here on the second page of the score, third page of the score, you can see more of the saxes are starting to filter in, right? So what's that, like measure 15 or 16? Right, so that's a figure that's going to come back a couple times. So there's this ascending bass line in the bari sax, right? Kind of whole tone-ish. Again, kind of this call and response. When I first got the demo, it was like 2 bars of B minor 7 right there. So harmonically, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. For me, that just felt like, with everything else that had happened up to that point, that's such a letdown energy-wise that we needed to do something, right? So these are just kind of passing, but it creates some interest, right? Especially if there's nothing vocally happening, it's a great opportunity for the instruments to help carry the energy. And so that's all that was, right? C sharp diminished, helping us to get to the first inversion of B minor 7. And then towards the end of this phrase, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So there's that kind of rhythmic motif from the intro again. Right, da 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 bam bam. Right, we saw a similar idea. So it's just a variation, right? That's all it is. Trying to be as economical as possible, right? We don't need a million ideas. You just need a couple ideas, and then you can, if you're really thoughtful about it, you can kind of make them work and develop them. It doesn't mean you're just copying and pasting necessarily, but you are trying to reference what you've already produced. It's also a lot more enjoyable for the listener if it's not, you're not always being inundated with a bunch of new ideas. And as a listener, you might not know what it is. Like, you might not know it's like a and two and a 3-note, 8th note idea or something. But I think our brains latch on to patterns, and there's something that feels nice about a pattern. So verse 2. In the first verse, kind of, what do? We did this. And so now we have this variation. Is from verse 1. But now we have a little bit of a variation here, and we have a nice opportunity to kind of build a mini little sax voicing here. I love that. With this type of orchestration, I feel like a lot of times the trombones really have an opportunity to support. When the saxes are playing kind of a melody, right? And then the next part, and then 3, 4, right? So there's all these kind of vertically stacked melodies on top of each other. And so the trombones don't need to necessarily match that, but I think the trombones kind of function as little points of emphasis underneath. They support it harmonically. Again, these are just real simple voicings. Tritone sub, fancy. And when you stack that together, yeah, it's a nice. A lot of times I also find that in typical just like meat and potatoes types of voicings and orchestration, having a couple, like if this is the sax, like these are sax voicings and these are trombone voicings, like having a little bit of overlap really creates like a nice little bit of glue. So for example, like this this voicing here in the sax is the top 2 notes in the trombones are those bottom 2 notes in the sax, if that makes sense. So there's a little bit of like this happening. You know, even as you can see as the score progresses, like even if you didn't read music or didn't even hear it, actually you can just see there's more and more black ink, right? The orchestration just kind of builds and builds and builds. Then after that, we finally get some trumpets. So then we make it to the bridge or the B section. Going into the bridge, I wanted it to I want a big arrival, but then I want it to like open up and just feel like way more spacious. And so there's less rhythmically going on. So you'll notice that there's just like more sustainy things. Right, almost like strings. We didn't add strings to this song, but I want it to feel more lush. Right, and again, thinking about voice leading as the means of deciding what voicings to move to horizontally. I also like creating little lines, right? So in the saxes there, it's just leading us, right? It's leading our ears as opposed to just kind of 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, which would be fine, but just more boring, I would say. Then there's this moment a few measures after that. So there's this waterfall or pyramid thing that's happening, if you can see in the score. And this is an idea I don't think it necessarily originated with Maria Schneider, kind of punctuating each of those trumpets so that the trumpets are falling down. Right? And I love punctuating that with piano octaves, like higher up. It's just like such a cool effect, you know. It's like a sparkle. So if the trumpets are here, I'm actually playing the bottom note with my thumb. That's the trumpet note. And I think in the outro bridge section, right, it's even one octave higher up than that. Now, this was also a spot harmonically in the song where it was just like 2 bars of D major, which again felt really anticlimactic to me. Right? It was just this. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so again, just looking for little either diatonic or passing chords. Right? Which might feel a little bit out of place, you know, stylistically from big band music, but this little waterfall effect on top, you almost don't even realize that it's just almost almost like gospel or R&B walk-up. There's just movement happening. So anytime there's space or anything that feels static, I really believe that for big band music especially, you have such an opportunity to kind of help paint these pictures, and why not? Why not use some of these colors at your disposal? Kind of fast forwarding, there is this section, this shout section, right? That's pretty typical of big band music. So at the end of this section, and then it breaks for a piano solo. That was something I knew I wanted to include in this arrangement because it is such a cornerstone of big medium swing or upswing big band music. You know, Count Basie, Duke Ellington is just when everyone are playing together. Like there's this, I think the term is like homophony, right? Which is to say, rhythmically everyone's playing the same rhythm, but the chords are changing. But it's almost like if you had 20 fingers, or I guess 13 fingers with the 13 instruments, you'd be able to play. There's all these things going on, and it sounds like this with the whole band. Especially when the band is laying back against the drums. It creates this like super epic feel. Yeah, what's going on here? I love that Barry sax. But basically you have this melody. And then it's just a matter of like harmonizing that. I remember when I sat down, I just kind of defaulted to, like that's how I started it, which is like all kind of like parallel. And a lot of those notes don't belong to D major, right? So I think context is everything. When they're happening so fast, it's not like anything else harmonically is really going on. I mean, the bass is walking, but it's really not competing harmonically with anything else. So you can kind of get away with a little bit more outside harmony, so to speak. And especially when things are moving in an intentional direction, I think ears are naturally just more forgiving, right? You can kind of hear it's all kind of chromatic and like moving, kind of planing with parallel voicings. And beyond that, I think I did not go back to here. I actually went to like the next chord. We're going from D to a major 3/7, F sharp 7, and instead of going straight to the F sharp 7, I thought it was an opportunity to do a 2/5 there. So go to like a C sharp minor 11, right? It just creates a little bit more pull. The last thing I'll say about kind of this top-down approach when you have like big shout sections where all the 13 horns or however many horns you have are functioning as one unit, it's just an incredible amount of power. It's not a sound or a technique that I'd want to use in every single part of the song, but when you're first kind of announcing, here's the instrumental section and everything else that has been kind of background or more supporting the vocal, I feel like this is a great spot to start because you get people's attention right off the bat. It's a totally different sound than anything else we've heard up to this point. The last thing that I want to look at in this arrangement is just this New Orleans section. So we're kind of going along. We have this solo section with the shouts, horns, piano break, back to the horns. The vocal comes back in for another bridge. Towards the end of that, this is where we're at. It totally pivots, right? Stylistically, we go from what felt maybe like 1920s New York swing clubs, you know, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, to now a few hundred miles south in New Orleans. There's this figure which was on the demo, the or some variation of that. Basically, it's going back and forth between F sharp 7, flat 9, if you will, and then B minor. And so you're kind of going back and forth and back and forth. So, of course, we kind of run into this struggle of, like, how do we keep things interesting when it's literally just two chords going back and forth? So we had Emmanuel Etcham on trumpet and Roy Agee on trombone with, like, plunger mutes just do their thing, and it turned out amazing. So again, it's like gradually building. It's like one guy walks into the club and another guy walks in like off the street and they're playing, and it's just like the whole thing builds. And then after that, then we get these. So I'll mute the soloist for now. We get this kind of, again, building pattern here in the horns. With the piano. That was another thing that I wanted to make sure, like it's an 8-bar phrase essentially that's repeated 6 times. So at the end of each 8-bar phrase, I wanted to make sure that there was like a different way that we were getting back to F sharp 7. So the first time we go back to F sharp 7, we're kind of walking up to it, and then the second time we're kind of going right. So we get there harmonically. Right, as opposed to the first time. So coming at it from different angles can be a helpful thing. And with the soloist, I just feel like this turned into like one of the highlights of this song for me from an arranging perspective, because it was so different and it was so fun to kind of like, in some ways, the available material went from this to this. Right, there's way less to work with from a harmonic perspective, but then you throw the soloists in there, and then you create like these like tiered levels of things that kind of just excite the music. So to begin with, we have the piano figure, the bass joins in, the bari sax and bass trombone join those main notes, and then we have these stabs with the brass. We have background figures. So, of course, the challenge was like, how do we gracefully exit this section, this New Orleans section, which was totally different, and get back to the original kind of big band feel, being as economical as possible with these different ideas. From the very beginning, we were doing, and so I was like, well, if we could use that same kind of figure, again, it's a variation on it, but the core of the idea is unchanged, right? It's like this ascending 3 or 4 note idea, and using that to get us back. It's almost like it's like a memory of where we were. So it kind of plants this like memory floats back up. It's like, oh yeah, this is how I get back to where I need to go. And then on top of that, we're going back and forth from F sharp to B minor, and it's like, well, we need to land on this B flat. And so for me, I was just like, well, if we can just create a line. So piano left hand and bass kind of help create this ascending line that gets us back to the B flat. And then from there on out, it's really just like a couple tags, and then the song ends. Big trash can, I think. I should say Derek Phillips on drums and tambourine was the perfect call for this song. I mean, he's just incredible. If you don't know who he is, check him out. But he really, like, there were a couple of these transitions where it just wouldn't have been possible without, like, his ears and his creativity, like, knowing how to negotiate the parts on the kit, going back and forth from, like, a swing thing to a New Orleans thing and then back to the swing. He did an amazing job. Brian Allen, bass, absolutely killed it. That's the song, kind of a big picture overview of Whatever Will I Do. It's been out for at least a few months at this point, and Wil will be putting out, I think, 5 more songs later this year. So a few more of them are big band arrangements that I've done for him. Some of them have strings on them too. We'll take a look at those perhaps in the future as well. But thanks so much for checking this out. I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully it was informative on some level, and I'll catch you next time.